Our next speaker is Doug Smith. Doug Smith is the Managing Director, UK Advisory for Camco, but in fact I think he's spent a lot of his career outside the UK, particularly in China and indeed in some 50 other countries, dealing with climate change and carbon. Doug.
Okay, thank you, Andy. As Andy mentioned, my name's Doug Smith. I'm from a company called Camco. Our business is emissions reductions through energy projects, and a big part of that business is in the clean development mechanism in Asia in particular. We actually provide about 30% of the carbon credits from the clean development mechanism called CERs, which are produced in China, and that is in itself a significant proportion of the carbon credits produced in the world. So I'll be talking mainly today about what happened at Copenhagen, and also about this distinction between voluntary markets and compliance markets, which Andy has referred to. And the main point I would like to make is that there's a link between the voluntary and the compliance, and that's in a word, preparedness. In recent discussions, an EU policy advisor, Jürgen Lefebvre, was suggesting that the EU could take its link with the clean development mechanism out of the UN system and over to voluntary systems. And given the volumes of emissions reductions that are being agreed to internationally, that is quite a significant potential. What our experience suggests in working on CDM and carbon emissions reductions projects in general to business is that you need to be very, very careful of the risks. It's not easy, and in fact what we do as a business is we take on that risk on behalf of our clients. As we move forward, there's going to be increasing risk, both from policy and from delivery, the ability to actually deliver on your emissions reductions targets. And you will need advice of a company that has got a track record in doing that. 2009 was an extremely difficult year, culminating in Copenhagen. However, I would say that the Copenhagen Accord was an unprecedented agreement, and commitments flowing from that accord are increasing, and domestic arrangements are growing as well. So although carbon credits prices might have been significantly reduced as a result of the financial crisis and demand for carbon credits, both voluntary carbon credits and certified emissions reductions from the clean development mechanism, they are likely to go up. And the Accord, I'll spell out a number of things agreed in the Copenhagen Accord. First of all, it was a document written at Copenhagen. There was quite a bit of disappointment over that there wasn't an agreement between 194 countries who were present at Copenhagen. But nonetheless, a document was developed, and many, well, all developed or Kyoto signatories have added their targets to the annex to that accord by the 31st of January, which was agreed at the time. And furthermore, many developing countries, including the BRICS countries, have added their what is referred to as nationally appropriate mitigation actions to the accord. These set out intentions and targets such as reducing energy intensity, for example, in China. So there's a lot of targets which are being put alongside the accord and which will be driving, although not a binding international agreement, very significant national level action. A big question over the future is what will happen with the EU's link to carbon credits developed in other parts of the world. At the moment, and I'll give a bit of background here, under the EU ETS, a company with a commitment under that scheme can import up to just 15% of its allowance from a developing country through the UN Clean Development Mechanism. Now, as we move forward into the third period under the EU ETS, which lasts until 2020, and this is agreed within the EU ETS, it's likely that there will be a continued link between that EU ETS and some form of mechanism, whether it's the Clean Development Mechanism or not. And there's a word used, comitology, to describe where the EU is allowed to, where it wants to get those credits from, what type of credits, what types of projects, and so on. So supply is likely to be quite limited from developing countries into the EU ETS. Demand is likely to be quite high with the continuation, so we can expect to see an increase in carbon credits prices. Just a word on domestic arrangements as well. The international discussions and the Copenhagen Accord, the EU level agreements, are driving national level approaches as well. The carbon reduction commitment in the UK is one example. In India, the government is piloting a carbon trading system to trade on a cap and trade system on energy intensity rather than absolute emissions. And that's something that Camco is working on with the Indian government at the moment. It's very difficult to predict what will happen in the US, but there are voluntary schemes which have been in place for many years. As I mentioned before, there is a possibility that voluntary schemes will develop and link to the compliance schemes in the future. So, whilst the Copenhagen Agreement, well, there was no agreement at Copenhagen, and perhaps we're naive to expect that on the basis of 194 signatories to the convention seeking to reach agreement over one document. It is nonetheless a milestone and has set down an accord which is driving regional and domestic arrangements which will drive forward emissions reductions for industry in many parts of the world, including the UK. So business will be very wise now to be prepared for the regulations which are coming out of that, and to be prepared for the risks of not paying sufficient attention to the development on an international level. Thank you very much.